Minecraft is a game full of infinite possibilities. It's true. There are lots of blocks, landscapes, biomes.
And you can build whatever you want in it.
Yes, thank you, Daniel. Thank you very much. What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? My name is Casanova, and welcome to another video. And in this video, I hope to help you become better builders, and hopefully I can teach you a little something about how to build really great houses as well as great structures all together in Minecraft. So without further ado, let's dive right in. Okay, so there are some players that straight up suck at building. They choose blocks with bad color schemes, blocks with bad texture nightmare palettes, and they'll also choose blocks that are just flat out inappropriate for a house environment altogether. But that's only one side of the whole ordeal. On the other hand, you have players that are decent or great at building, and they always choose a great block palette. But blocks are only one part of the equation. Another part is the shape. A lot of people just make a oak plank box and don't even give a hoot about detail, and that's a step in the wrong direction. Again, the players that are decent or great at building, they have a shape that is cohesive and appropriate for a house environment. Okay, so to be fair, a lot of Minecraft players typically only play in survival, and survival does complicate things a bit because some are really painful to acquire in survival mode, but that's probably why we test things out in creative, or why map players build stuff in creative, so that we have those blocks at our disposal. As I hop into a creative test world, I'm going to show you the fundamentals of becoming a better builder in Minecraft. So, the first step in the right direction of becoming a better builder is a block palette. Now, what do you want your house to be made of? But you also have to keep in mind there are some blocks that are flat out inappropriate for a house environment, such as purpur or magma blocks. So, you want to pick your blocks very, very, very carefully. Now, I am kind of a stickler for the old rustic house type of building style, so I typically go with cobblestone to lay down the foundation, as well as log for the support structures, but not everybody builds in a rustic house style. Some may spring for a suburban house, or some may spring for a modern house, and that's perfectly fine. But cobblestone, I mean, not only is it everywhere, but it's also a great foundation block. When you choose your blocks, you should choose blocks that not only complement each other, but will actually make for a coherent house altogether when everything is all placed and said and done. Now, one of the things that helps is to have your block palette laid out in such a way to where not only do you have like everything present and laid out, but you'll also have a guideline to remind yourself to stick to those blocks specifically. But of course, you might not get all of them in the first go. Like, you may forget to, I don't know, choose something for the windows. But when it comes to glass panes in survival, the only way you can get them back is through a silk touch pickaxe or a silk touch axe or any other tool that has silk touch. You always want to lay out your block palette. Now let's go to the second step of becoming a better builder, is the shape. Now, a lot of people will just make a rectangle house and not give a second thought to the shape. Or they might even make a square. where all four sides are the exact same. Now, that is a good start. However, when it comes to making a cohesive house, you don't want to do that. So here I just laid out a cobblestone rectangle, but see what I'm doing here? I added a rectangle right onto it, and it already has a much nicer looking shape. Oh, and watch. I'm gonna do it again. See? We're already taking a step in the right direction. And you may even want to go crazy and throw in some diagonal shapes. Now, I'm not an expert with building in diagonals, but already the rectangular base that I started off with, it's already going in the right direction. Like, take a look at the rectangle and take a look at the things that I added onto it. Now we have a bit better of a shape, and just like that, we could probably start building and adding in all these other details. Now, putting framing in when you have a diagonal shape, that is actually going to be a bit tricky. But what I found is that if you put the framing in, like, if you put it like right next to the corner block, kind of like what I did right here. Hold on, let me show you. I'll do this again. That already works quite well. Connecting them, that's also going to be a bit of another challenge. I forgot what I was going to say. Connecting beams when you have diagonals, that is actually going to be a bit difficult, especially when you have like the bottom of the log showing from down under. But we do have the six-sided wood blocks. While it may be a bit painful to do this when you're building in diagonals, it'll all work out in the end. Okay, so here I have pretty much put the framing up, and now we could probably fill in the floor. Now, when it comes to floors, a lot of the blocks that are typically inappropriate for walls may be a bit more suitable as a floor block. However, there are some blocks that just flat out don't work in a house environment, even as a floor, which is why I typically only go for materials that I would use for walls and roofs, such as dark oak, for example. I typically use this as a roof block for rustic houses. However, it also works very nice as a floor block. I mean, if you take a look at the color and the texture, it definitely does remind me of a wooden floor. And other blocks that I've seen people use as a floor, while it may work in some house situations, I don't always fully agree with, which is why block palettes and choosing the right blocks is the essential first step. And of course, the second step being shape, and then the third step is, well, of course, building it up. Now, of course, when you build up your house, you can always change your mind to switch out certain blocks or to switch out certain details. But you always want to build your house up before you decide to, like, decorate it. Now, of course, some of you, when you're building, you may want to put in a second floor depending on the type of house that you're making. Well, when you're building up the second floor, do you want all segments that you added onto your rectangle to go all the way up? Do you want to cut some parts off from the second floor? Well, how do we continue on without everything going all the way up to the roof? Well, you start by adding in the corners of the bits that you want to keep going up. Kind of like what I just did right there. But that is another thing that I am going to talk about later on. So, I'm adding on to the edges that I want to continue up. But of course, there are some areas that I am going to be cutting off, such as the entrance protrusion as well as the diagonal bit. Now, staircases with diagonals, those are rather tricky to do, but they are doable. So here, this is where I run into a bit of a dilemma. Now, how am I going to continue this up, but leave the diagonal section down? Well, I'll build up the corners where the diagonal part starts, but then I'll add in those bits there, and then I'll drop this part down, and I'll cut it off here where this floor meets. And I guess for the heck of it, I'll also build those up. Now, you may notice that we do have some uneven edges, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, because not all houses are completely symmetrical. So, if one side looks a bit odd compared to the other, it's totally fine. I mean, not all structures are completely balanced or completely symmetrical all the way around. Now, of course, some of us who are very fond of building tall houses probably want to add in a third and final floor. Well, how are we going to do that? Well, it's just like when we added this corner over the diagonal bit. We lined these bits up, and then, oops, we build down, but cut off where this part of the floor meets. Like that. And then we can add the rest of the framing. Like that. And just like that, we have a cohesive shape. Okay, so as you can see here, I've filled in the walls, and I also placed dark oak planks around where these beams are to indicate where the floors cut off. And of course, you could always use a different floor, you could always change your mind or whatever, but this is just for demonstration purposes. I'm not saying, hey, do exactly what I do. No, no, no. I'm just trying to give you some advice and tidbits to creating better houses. So now, that takes me to the next step, roofs. Now, of course, roofs, there are so many different types of roofs. Now, of course, the most typical roof is, of course, the classic A-frame, and there's nothing wrong with going with the same old typical A-frame where you build stair blocks and then meet them in the middle. But it works better in this situation than it would for most other roofs, because these are not like huge rectangles where you know, you just make a box and then you have an A-frame all the way up to the top, and it's just so long and wide that it just doesn't work. But because I've segmented each layer, the A-frame is not really as big and hideous, for lack of a better word, for this kind of a house. I mean, you see how small that is? And that's part of what makes this, like, perfectly suitable for a house. The A-frame, of course, is only one option for the roof. Another option that you could do is, of course, the slab method. Now, the slab method, I mean, it's narrow, it's not quite as steep as the typical A-frame. It's a bit more shallow and a more simple approach. But of course, it doesn't look bad when it's all done, but you may run into some problem when you try to if you try to do that. So you gotta try to make sure that everything comes together in the end. There is also a combination of both slabs and stairs, and it's not something that you see very often, but it is an option that does exist should you desire to use it. So here we can see the combination of stairs and slabs, as well as full blocks, and it does actually work with this kind of a roof. Plus, with the addition of the actual roof blocks, which for some reason I chose spruce planks for, it actually comes together in the end as a very well thought out roof. Now, of course, some roofs are different. At the end, it all works. Now, of course, when it comes to these kind of roofs, some would change the frame to go along with the roof, and some would even put in stairs like that. And, you know, that doesn't look too bad. However, the two different grays, they don't really mesh very well together, but it's still a thing that you can do. And, you know, it's not a complete and total catastrophe, but I normally would just have the frame like that, and I would build the wall up behind it. And that doesn't look too bad either, but then we have this odd gapping in there, which I'll admit doesn't quite work. And I think that's probably why I had the slab in the first place. And now it works. So again, those are things that you can do, and it doesn't look that bad. I mean, you can always experiment with what looks good, what doesn't look good. It all depends on what you're trying to build and whether or not you do it correctly, or if you're just too lazy to give a second thought about what you're building. I mean, some people, they'll just build something and they won't even think about how it looks or how it fits in. Some people will just build sloppy structures and not give a thought as to whether or not it looks good. But of course, there are some people who troll others by saying, "This is my structure, and it is completely beautiful, and you can't say otherwise." And you know, it is it is admirable to not give a dang about what other people think, but you also have to keep in mind, not everybody is going to agree. So here I just finished this roof, and here for this roof, I'm going to do something just a bit different, because you see, there's some houses with A-frames that have just the plank blocks going this way as opposed to the stair blocks, and that's mainly because some people will switch this out for a log block, or they'll add on some slabs later on to give it some extra shape. And there are several different options that you could do, but trust me, when it comes to a roof, do not just go for the flat edge unless you're making like a balcony or a porch or something. But trust me, when it comes to roofs, the flat edge is by far the last thing you ever want to do. And when you make a roof, it's gotta have a shape. Just like the foundation of a house, it's always got to have some type of shape. And when you also build a roof, and you have several different edges to it, you don't want to just, like, make it go all the way up on all four sides. No. You want to have each roof going a different way. Like, with this roof, it's going that way, and with this roof, it's going that way. This roof, it's pretty much going to go this way, but there is going to be a little bit of a difference, and that difference involves a dormer of sorts. Now, if you don't know what a dormer is, it's sort of like an extra shape that makes a side-facing, a sideways roof look very front-facing. And I have seen houses close to where my grandparents live where they have dormers. Now, that right there, it is a bit off-center, but this is just an example that I threw in to give an example of what I'm talking about. Now, this thing that I'm doing here, this is another variation to roofs. There's some dormers, or there's some roofs that have that kind of effect going on. And this doesn't completely work in this type of situation because we run into this bit here, but this is another example that we could potentially do. Now, here's another example of a roof, and I like to call this the M roof because, well, with the way that I've built it, it actually looks like the letter M. Now, this, of course, is actually a bit of a stretch, but this does look better than some other cases where, like I said, it's just a wide box and it just goes all the way up to the top, and this gives it some shape where, of course, it's not the typical, like, all the way up to the top. It has some shape and it has some definition that not many people think to put in. So this, of course, like I said, this is another example, but this is much better than the typical, you know, wide A. So as you can see, I slightly changed my mind. I decided to replace all the granite with stone brick. And if I can be honest, I absolutely like stone brick a whole lot more than granite. It's one of my favorite blocks, and this actually works so much better than the granite did. Ah, hell, even andesite would have looked a lot better, since, the grays, they complement each other a bit more. So, of course, when we have a A-frame that's odd-numbered, you can make this all work together by having an upside-down stair in the middle, and then a regular stair on top of that, like this, so we have this kind of a shape going on, and it works. Now, of course, I almost built this up to the top, but I left this here because there is always a chance that we're going to run into something like this down the way. But of course, we can change things around by replacing these with full stairs, and then bring all this along like that. And of course, switch out for the slab. We bring that along like that. And of course, that all flows together pretty nicely. There are some people who like that look a bit better. It really is up to your personal taste, which looks better. Okay. Now, like I was saying, it's up to your personal taste. Does this corner look better, or does that corner look better? After taking a step back and looking at the two side by side, I realized that this actually looks a lot better. And that is another step that a lot of people don't take when they're building. They don't take a step back and look at what they've built and examine it. And of course, when they say that they're finished, they look at it and they're like, ooh, I kind of regret doing it, but I'm too lazy to fix it. But what does it matter? It's beautiful. Seriously, I have actually seen people like that, and it is... no. Just no. So, of course, fill this in, and of course, there is also the potential for an attic. So, I'll just fill this part in right here, or fill the border at least. And then we have this bit right here that kind of sticks out like a sore thumb. You can always switch that out right there. Or if you don't like this part altogether, you could just take that down and place that stair right there. And it all kind of fills in a lot smoother. And honestly, I think it works a lot better this way. In all that roof placing, I completely forgot about this diagonal section. So, what can we do with this? Well, if we take a look here, this upside down stair kind of starts where this beam connects the two pillars. However, with the diagonal, I feel more tempted to place the planks like that and have the slab completely surrounding them. Now, I will admit it is a bit of a lazy cop-out, but this is actually an option that I think is fairly usable. But of course, there is also the stair option, which you can do, but it may look a bit awkward, depending on whether or not you actually place the blocks in a manner that can actually, work, and you might have to place throwaway blocks to get this to work hand in hand. It looks okay, but I think the best bet is, unfortunately, the lazy cop-out method. And of course, for the lazy cop-out method, you may want to place the planks first and then put the slabs in. If you want, you can do it with stairs, although this part might make it a bit awkward. But I'm going to go for the slab method. I think the shallow transition will be most beneficial. That's the word, beneficial. And, you know, as you can see, it is a shallow slope, but it actually works in the long run. Okay, so at this point I have the house all built up. It's a nice shape, and it's not all the same thing. So this, of course, is a step in the right direction of becoming a better builder. Not everything is completely the same, and yes, some edges are odd in comparison, but this is actually a bit on the realistic side, because there are some houses that have been built that look like this. So, but of course, now with the main structure built, we can get on to the nitty-gritty detailing. And of course, because this is a house, we always want to start with the front door. Now, here is a little trick that I like to use when it comes to doors. I like to place them in sideways, and this is especially handy when you're playing survival, because when you close them, the zombies can't break down the door, they can't get into the house, so you're completely safe. And another thing for houses, you need windows. Now, of course, a lot of people will just put in the full glass blocks and not give a second thought about it. I, on the other hand, like to use the glass panes, because one, not only does it give it depth, but I also think that it looks a whole lot better. And you can also put in trap doors. I usually use dark oak, but I think acacia may look better because, well, acacia logs. And that, I think, makes this look a bit on the cohesive side. But of course, if you want to use the dark oak, that doesn't look too bad either, but then the brown starts to overpower a bit. But let's not forget, there is also the birch trapdoor. This, I think, could also work with this type of house because, well, I used the snow blocks, and the birch trapdoor does have white, and the brown handles kind of go hand in hand with the dark oak door. And of course, you may want to replace these two blocks with some stairs like that. But of course, if you were to use that, it would look odd from a distance, because the two whites are different. Snow is kind of like bluish white, and this is more of a grayish white. So, but hey, you do have options, and options are good. So, of course, you can always change your mind, experiment with what looks good, what doesn't look good, what works, what doesn't work. It's all about how everything looks in your eyes when you're building these things. And I also forgot about a decoration technique that you could do with these type of windows. You can have slabs all around it like that. It's a simple detail, but it does add that bit of dimension. So those are all things that you can do with the windows. And of course, with crevices like this, you can, of course, decorate it with some sweet berries or some rose bushes. I actually forgot what category sweet berries get put into. So, yeah, adding plants of some kind, it adds greenery and it makes everything come to life. And of course, there is also the possibility of putting in a patio or a front deck, and it's a simple operation. You extend the front out, and you can use either stairs or slabs to build everything up and to, you know, make everything come together. And now, that brings us to the interior. So starting off, I'm going to begin with putting in a staircase. Now when it comes to a staircase, in theory you could get away with making it a different block from the floor, but honestly I think everything would mix together and complement each other well if the stairs and the floor were all the same block. Now granted, in my house, not all the carpets look the same. Some of the carpets are different colors. However, I think you would be better off doing something more on the lines of this. You may do some changes, some remodeling of the interior, and that's completely fine. I mean, we're at that stage where you can make all the changes you want, and oh, and if you're doing this in survival, you may also want to place torches. Or you may even want to place torches in creative, or at the very least, drink a night vision potion so you can at least see what the heck you're doing. Because of how small the house is, there's probably not a whole heap of a lot of space to work with, but if you work with the shape that you've provided yourself, you can actually bring everything all together. So of course, a room that's only 2 wide, you're not going to have a whole lot of wiggle room, but of course, if you do that, then the staircase, or this walkway from the staircase, that's gonna be a bit of a problem as well. So, there is also that. Okay, now here's something that might confuse some people. Yes, I prefer to use the glass panes for windows. However, when it comes to diagonal windows, you're probably going to want to use the full blocks. Yeah, it probably doesn't give that much depth, but let me take these out. If you were to try and place the panes like this, it doesn't exactly look that good. It doesn't really work. So your best bet, of course, is to use the full glass blocks. And, you know, it's not the end of the world.
It's not.
And besides, we have this!
Bomb?
What the f-
Warning. The following video is experiencing technical difficulties. Viewer discretion is advised.
I don't even know how that happened. So I switched that dark oak out for another snow block. This actually gives the wall a much cleaner look, and we don't have to worry about that bit sticking out like a sore thumb. But now we come to a bit of a little hurdle here. Now, normally you would probably want to continue the staircase up. However, you know what? I'm gonna finish it on this side so I can demonstrate this next point that I want to bring up. You see, you'll hit your head on this part, and you're probably not going to make it all the way up to the top. And even then, like, you'll have to crouch to get up to this level if you have the staircase continuing like that. So, if you have a second floor that's somewhat similar to this, you may want to have the staircase up to the next level elsewhere. Maybe in here. It all depends on whether or not it works and how much space you have to work with. Now, of course, some people may want to put in an attic, but of course, with the nature of how I built this, another staircase probably won't work. So, of course, there is always the alternative of putting in a ladder. And of course, there's not a lot of space up here, but there is enough to where you could store pretty much all your valuables. So you can have a double chest here, double chest there, some barrels, another double chest, and there, we got storage for days. And what the hey, we could put some final chests in there. And of course, we could also put in a couple windows, but this is probably going to be a bit on the tricky side because we have a pillar out there, but we can alter the design and stuff to fit the aesthetic. Like, we could switch that out there and place the snow back, and we have a simple shape like that. And if we put in the glass panes, that works there. I mean, that's a nice window. Of course, this we would end up with a 2x2 square window, but my grandparents' house in Snohomish, they have windows like that. So, of course, we can continue with adding these decorations until we are pretty much satisfied with how much we've put in. Put a window in there. I'm pretty sure the ladder is there, so we'll have to put this window in there. And of course, as I stated before, you can put trapdoors on the sides of these windows to tie them in all together, and that actually looks pretty good. Now, of course, you are going to want to remember, not every wall is going to need a window. However, sometimes walls do look bland without windows, but there is a solution for the windowless walls. Like, we could always put in planters. Let me build what I mean here. Oh wait, hold on. So we have a row of grass blocks there, some trapdoors covering it up, and then of course we can let's try a tulip and an orchid, and then place those in there. That already adds so much to the build. You can continue doing that with these bits up here. It just adds so much to the build. I almost forgot to mention, when it comes to these planters that I put over there, on the diagonals, you're probably not going to want to do that, unless you're okay with using these wooden stairs, because let me show you what I'm talking about. With the trapdoors, you can't place another one when this trapdoor is already there, so you'll have to use the wooden stairs to try and make it work. And even then, there's more wood than there is grass or dirt or whatever you're putting your flowers in. So there is also the potential for putting in a chimney, should you so desire. And if you do decide to put in a chimney, I put those away. And there are a couple different ways of putting in a chimney. Oh, wait, I think I forgot. Oh, wait, I already had it. Now, there are a few different ways of putting in a chimney, and I grabbed the end and side wall, but you still get the same idea. Now, that right there, that is a straightforward chimney. You can also have it shorter. That works as well. But of course, there is also the bent and whacked chimney design. You can also use a 4x4 cobblestone wall like that, or 4x4 cobblestone pillar, excuse me, and then you can grab the campfire and there it is, the spruce trapdoors, build the campfire all around, and place the spruce trapdoors. Now you can do that, but it would look better if you actually added some shape. And to add shape to a chimney, you start with a 4x4 base, but then you knock some of the blocks out. And then we have a 1x1 at the end of it. Place the campfire there, and just like that, we have a cohesive chimney. Those are my little tips and tricks on becoming a better house builder. I'm not sure if I got the message across, but if you managed to learn a thing or two about building, well, I'm glad I could at least do that for you. Now the interior, like I said, that's up to your own imagination, your own interpretation. Like, you could probably put a living room or a bedroom there. You could probably put the kitchen in here. The bedroom plans, that's up to you. Attic. Pretty much the world is your oyster at this point. Like, I can't really tell you how to, like, build everything, like, exactly to my specifications, but I hope I at least gave you a few tips and tricks on building better. So that about does it. So I'm sorry if this video wasn't like a step-by-step tutorial or whatever, and I do understand this was not my best work, but that is not the purpose of this video. The purpose of this video is to, you know, give some advice and to try and, you know, point people in the direction of building better instead of, you know, just making a box and having no attention to detail. I want to try and push people in the direction of building better. That about does it for me, guys. If you like this video, make sure to hit that thumbs up, and if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. It won't cost you anything, but it will help me out a fair bit. I've been your host, Casanova, and I will catch you guys next time. Goodbye!
Angry runner!